Hello, my name is First Class Menefee, and I am today's host of Thinking Inside the Box, The Gauntlet, podcast of operations group, part of the NTC Warrior Chronicles. The Gauntlet brings you best practices from the Army's experts in combined arms operation. Topics we'll go over today will be field trans command posts, considerations for FTCP planning, common issues, points of friction at NTC. Hey, so Captain Shak, tell me about yourself.
Good morning. No, I greatly appreciate being here. I've been in the Army for 10 years. I am the force support company trainer for the maneuver support team here at the National Training Center. And when I PCS from here, I will have 8 rotations under my belt.
Okay, so let's get right into it. We'll talk about a couple of tasks that the FTCP has. Can you tell me what kind of FM or what kind of duties they may have?
The field training command post, there's really 3 main regulations. Just depends which one you're going to be looking at. The first one is the ATP 3-90.5, which is the Combined Arms Battalion. So in this regulation, it really talks about synchronizing, integrating the brigade combat team, constant support, coordinating logistics requirements with the support operations officer. You're coordinating with the actual BCT for personal service and replacement operations. And you're also coordinating retrograde of equipment and personnel to include casualty evacuation, personnel management. So really, all in all, it's really organizing, operating, and synchronization of logistics packages, aka log packs. So in addition to, so there's also 2 other regulations that people can actually look and figure out the best way to be successful with the field trained command post. The brigade combat team from FM 3-96 and ATP 4-90, the brigade support battalion. The purpose for the FTCB is pretty much the same. For instance, it's integrate the BCT support concept, coordinate with BSB for support, configure log paths, coordinate retrograde of equipment and personnel. But what's different is really the leaders in each different regulation. For instance, in FM 3S96, the leaders it states the S4 rep, HACXO, HAC first sergeant, and then U supply rep. However, if you look in ATP 4-90, the BSB, it states the S1 rep, S4 rep, a unit supply rep, and the FSC, XO, or first sergeant. The last thing is really going back to the ATP 3-90.5, the Combined Arms Battalion. The purpose for the FTCP is the control center for S1, the control center for supply, and coordinate all sustainment for the maneuver battalion. So really, at the end of the day, it's really all about talent management, and it's really clearly defining the specified task and purpose for everybody who's going to be at the FTCP. And it's really understanding the strengths and weaknesses of everybody who's going to be in there and operating there while in the actual box at the National Training Center.
I'm happy you hit on management. Just because you're 91 Bravo doesn't mean you can't be 88 Mike and move that log back. When it comes to tandem manager, who would you say is in charge of making sure that those things get done right?
The most common pattern I've seen so far is really the FSC commander is going to be at the FTCP inside the brigade support area, talking to the brigade support battalion, the actual support operations officer. And also, if we go back in the sustainment and support of large scale combat operations published from the NTC here, it's really comes down to these considerations. Where's really the task and purpose of each individual inside the FTCP? Said individual have a task and purpose. What about the equipment posture there? The most common things we see is where do we put the containerized kitchen, the assault kitchen, the bulk water, and bulk fuel, and who's also in charge of those assets, specified task and purpose of everybody. And then really the next thing is who's going to be able to articulate for the actual battalion and be the LNO for the actual unit for sustainment decisions specified in unit. The most common thing we see so far is really the FSC commander really go to the BSB log syncs and actually advocate for the actual battalion. I've also seen the S4 OIC and also sometimes the battalion XO with the FSC commander in the same, the BSB log sync. Definitely pertinent. We actually see those individuals all face to face. They actually go and do continuous like sync meetings and synchronize sustainment efforts. And really, the last thing for the considerations is training personnel and the force support company. Due to the size of the district platoon and also the maintenance, if you go lay out the actual training calendar, there's not a lot of training days out there allocated. So you have to be very creative. And one of the things I've seen so far that's made units successful is units cross train on various types of equipment, and that include moving and hauling. One instance is the Hippo, the forward repair system, the Camel, the Water Buffalo, the 984 wrecker, the 978 fueler, and the tank rack module. I have a distro section really be cross trained on all of those sorts of assets. And to me, that's actually phenomenal. So it's really also the work rest cycle, right? So we can't have one person do all these missions day and night depending on the actual time. And it's also the actual weather plays an effect as well. So for instance, we did have one PL in my first rotation who like myself and the other OCs, even the commander agreed, hey, this guy needs to not go any more missions because he needs to actually take some time to go and sleep and recharge.
Okay. You gave up some good practices. Everyone being cross-trained is obviously a good thing. People being able to do multiple jobs. So you gave me some solutions already. But give me some common issues you might see or some friction points that you may see.
Points of friction I've seen so far as the FSC trainer here at National Training Center. The first one is the FTCP. I never seen them have a log pack tracker. Who is going on the actual movement? What commodities are they going to distribute? What vehicles are going by bubble number? Where are they going? When are they leaving the FTCP? Who is the link up point of contact? And what's really the anticipated arrival back? I did have one unit, the FSC commander, the executive officer, the distro PL, and the first sergeant lose accountability of a feeler during logistics readiness, logistics release operations. So really, the field went to the wrong BSA cluster after refueling a unit's TAA, and I eventually located a feeler and returned to the correct BSA cluster. Accountability of personnel equipment 100% of the time in the actual desert is pretty hard. So if you don't have any sort of system and process in place, personnel accountability becomes a real thing. It's a huge deal. Next thing is the FTCP doesn't track commodities. When I say commodity, I'm talking about the class 1, the water, food, the class 3, the fuel, class 4, construction material, class 5, the munitions, and also a class 9, repair parts, and also in general combat power. I did have one FSC commander would have some or all the information on what is on hand, what's being distributed, but that's not getting shared amongst everyone, or is it getting written down somewhere where everybody can see it? I've always seen this so far as the FSC commander would just be in the command vehicle with the JVCP and really just be by themselves. The best TTPs I've seen so far that made units pretty successful is you really use the SOP for swing law stats and use that as an analog product that would get updated. To me, there's really no point of making anything like brand new if you already have an SOP that has an established format. Just use that, put it on a whiteboard, and just continually to battle track it. The next thing that I've seen so far that works is the FSC commander and really the maintenance tech go to at the maintenance connection point or the UNCP where we actually talk to each other and continually sync for what is the combat power, what's being tracked, what's not being tracked, make sure they're tracking the same information, and it's also what's being reported. The next thing is the FSC commander do sync meetings with section leaders at a time where everyone was actually there. I've seen people, and even if I talked to the first sergeant, hey, what's really going on for today? The first sergeant doesn't really know. So once I suggested and pull the leaders in, hey, start doing sync meetings, I can't really tell you the time, just whatever time works for everybody. And once it was actually implemented, the operations started to get a lot better and a lot smoother. The next thing is really the FSC at the FTCP was hauling notional ammo for a couple of days and not knowing who should actually receive it. When I first observed that one, it's like really the allocations on who's going to get what at class 5 by quantity, nobody really knew. And that became a huge issue when trying to do any breach operations. So nobody really had the correct ammo or didn't have it at all. So it's definitely important to do that. So one of the things I start coaching is really the FTCP/FSC commander should be communicating with the battalion staff on a proper classified allocations very quickly during the first phase of the operation, just to really get a better idea of what's going on and try to make sure everybody gets the force on force and notional ammo as early as possible.
I hear your friction points, and a lot of the friction points you basically said communication. Communication, it comes down to having something in the works that is a working product that everyone can walk in and see what's going on here, what's going on there, and everyone's able to say, hey, this piece of equipment is moving and who's moving with it. Everyone's in the know. I've seen here since being here as an OC myself, the MCS or the company XO not being in sync with what's actually need to be on the ESR. The ESR not being updated such time, or the common denominator not being the same. The denominator changes in how many 59.8s was actually issued. First day of training, it'll be 150 59.8s issued, and then fourth day of training, it'll be only 100 that was being tracked. So with that being said, just the common denominator staying the same, even if it's rolling stock or just all pieces of equipment that's inside the box, just being tracked on the same track and never been on the same sheet of music. That's just from my foxhole. How about you tell me some ways to be successful in according with the regulations that you can find and people can actually look and see and say, hey, well, if I look at this, I can kind of come here and learn from my mistakes before I even have those mistakes.
That's a great question. So really, I'm going to break it down. First one is the command post functions. ATP 6-0.5. Six main command post functions is receive information, distributing information, analyze information, make recommendations, integrate resources, synchronizing resources, and also an added bonus is battle tracking. What that really means is, we'll say first one is receive information. Receive messages, reports, and orders from higher echelon, right? And it's also is the FSC commander getting the log stats from those he's supporting. The reason is because you know what needs to be pushed out for a log pack and not a LRP. It's also maintaining situation awareness of your class 1, your class 3, the class 4, class 5, and class 9. For distributing information, it's really the same thing, right? You need to know are the actual reports to hires getting submitted, like log stat and per stat. If it is, who's on the other end is actually acknowledging receipt of it. And if they are, okay, so what's the next step? What's really the next step forward to go and get the commodities pushed out? And it's also making sure the information is getting distributed to the appropriate sections. Next is the analyzing information. It's really still maintaining the situation awareness of going on during the battle period. It's also anticipating events and activities. So really the best example is for moving combat configured loads of your class 4, your construction materials. I've seen where the FSC commander doesn't have a part in the actual movement. However, I always go and tell the FSC commander, hey, just get ready to have a plan just in case something does happen. And really, on or around like 90%, something does happen, and the FSC commander does get tagged to go and move class 4 or CCLs all over the place inside the box. Next thing is making recommendations. So it's really go leading from the bottom up. And it's really talking to the XO on your analysis and what you have and how to make the operations a lot better. It's also talking to the battalion S4 and really doing face-to-face sustainment syncs. They can really just be going on a map inside the battalion talking about the next 24 or 36 hours. But it's also, hey, just making sure that battalion S4 understands the sustainment plan. Because really, at the end of the day, the FSC commander, if they're a logistician, they're really the senior logistician inside that battalion. And more times than not, that S4YC is not a sustainer. So it's very important for the FSC commander to try their best to see that S4 face to face and conduct as many syncs as possible. The next two things is integrating resources and synchronizing resources. In the actual doctrine, it says really coordinate the integration of combat multipliers. What really made some FSC commanders like successful is if they're at the FTCP is inside the brigade support area with the brigade support battalion, more likely than not, you'll have other FSC commanders to your left and to your right. My second rotation, this actually helped. I recommended, hey, you got another FSC commander next to you. I recommend go talk to the FSC commander and try and see what lift assets are available to go and help you move things back and forth. That paid huge dividends talking to the other FSC commanders and also just making sure you have a positive working relationship with them to go and help each other out. The next is actual battle tracking commodities. So really battle tracking, what it says in doctrines, consists of monitoring current location activity and combat power of friendly elements. But you can also do the same and also take it a little bit further and really start battle tracking your commodities from 1 to 9. And really TTPs I've seen so far that really works is develop a system to track information determined necessary to track. If you have your priority of support, your priority supply, that kind of sets the expectations of what's really important, what's not important. The same thing with identifying and prioritizing critical information and track. So if you read the op orders, that really gives you the answer. And next is making sure everyone in FTCP knows their task and purpose. There was one instance where a S4 NCOSC was at the FTCP. That individual got thrown in that situation and didn't really have a defined task and purpose. So that individual knew a lot about the S4 aspect of it, but it just wasn't being utilized in the correct way.
So what I gathered from that was being able to be proactive than reactive with the information that's out there. You know who you're supporting, and if you know who you're supporting, you know the quantities that you may need, and just better planning and saying, hey, this company has X, Y, and Z personnel. I might need to put on this log pack X amount of commodities. With that being said, as FSC on a maneuver task force, we have to support the engineers. Can you tell me like some hardships or some ways that FSCs can better support the engineer operations?
Going back in doctrine, engineer operations FM 3-34 The engineer staff officer uses the running estimates to determine the requirements for the unit and mission sustainment and compares the requirements with the reported status of subordinate units to determine the specific amount of supplies needed to support the operations. These requirements are then coordinated with a supporting sustainment unit or forward support element to ensure that the needed supplies are identified and resourced. The engineer staff officer then translates the estimate into specific plans that are used to determine the supportability of supported unit course of actions. After a course of action is selected, the specific sustainment input to the supported unit base operations order and paragraph 4 of the engineer annex is developed and incorporated. So that's a mouthful. This is really saying the senior logistician in that battalion needs to go and do face-to-face conversations with the engineer staff officer and really, hey, here are my running estimates for this exercise. The engineer staff officer takes it and actually implements it into the course of action development and the course of action analysis. From there, the actual results will be inputted into the unit-based operations order and also the engineer annex. That's really the best way to help these guys is the logistician needs to constantly talk to the engineer staff officer, not just the second step of NDMP, which is mission analysis. They need to continually talk to the engineer staff officer all the steps of the MDMP.
Communication is key. Things change, so you always have to be adaptable with what's going on. I mean, my first cycle here, being with the engineers, it was surprising me of how far one unit may be from the flock. So it was a matter of, okay, how do we communicate with them and say, hey, what do they need? And how do we support them? And it was, oh, they're on their own type of ordeal. And it was like, no one's never on their own. Logistics is always needed. So can you tell me about some principal sustainments that you see out there? I know for myself, I see rations of foods and things like that, or maybe even with the parts and stuff that come in hand. See a lot of parts not being on hand. So you have to, like you said, talk to another FSC. I see you have this in GCS Army. Can I borrow that if I go ahead and do a control swap exchange? What's the practices may you see out there?
The best practice is really just having that work and professional relationship prior coming to NTC. And that's really some of the best leading questions I always ask is, what's your relationship with the other FSC commanders? And what's your relationship with the Battalion XO? And also, what is your relationship with the Battalion S4? And also, if you talk to other Battalion S4s to see what the relationship is like. So as of right now, it's actually is pretty good. They do have conversations. However, like once they go here in the box, people don't have their phones. It's just a different story. But more times than not, probably like 90%, their working relationships do play a pretty big factor when actually doing sustainment out here.
Totally agree with that. The same way you conduct business in the rear, getting things done, is the same way you conduct business here. Just you're 100 kilometers away, so it's a little bit different to communicate. And so with that, we hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, our observer, coach, trainers are able to assist any unit. I invite you to look for the latest products from Operations Group and subscribe to Operations Group TAC Talks on YouTube for short lessons on successful techniques. Thank you for listening to Thinking Inside the Box, the Gauntlet, the podcast of Operations Group, part of NTC Warrior Chronicles.